Hello, everyone, and welcome to our President's Day special podcast. My name is Jessica, and again, I'm here with my dad. Hi, Dad.
Hi, Jessica.
Dr. Wright. Here in our podcast, Dr. Wright breaks it down for you, where we discuss phenomena in our daily lives and the science behind it. So, President's Day. Yeah, I was thinking about presidents and science to think of a topic for today's podcast.
A great change is at hand, and our task, our obligation, is to make that revolution, that change, peaceful and constructive for all.
So the media is so important for our politicians, and so I was kind of just wondering, what was life like before microphone? How did that work? You know, how were people heard? Because that seems like it would be a really important aspect of political life, is announcing your position on a topic to the masses. So, any insights on that, Dad?
Yeah, it's really interesting. When you mentioned this topic, it was kind of cool because I know a little bit about it, but also I wanted to study it a little bit. I called Monticello, which is the home of Thomas Jefferson, and talked to the curator there. And she gave me some real cool insight on the whole thing, which is really interesting. If you didn't have a loud voice way back when, you couldn't be heard. And if you couldn't be heard, you were in trouble. And that's, I guess, the bottom line. George Washington had a really loud, boisterous voice. He was booming. He was a tall man, about 6'2", 6'3". For back then, that was really big. Being heard was critical. And what you basically did years ago was very simple. You put your hands around your mouth and you screamed. Now, that process of putting your hands around your mouth, what it does is it takes the sound that's coming out of your mouth and focuses it in one direction. It doesn't make your voice any louder. It simply focuses the sound that comes out of your voice into a funnel. Matter of fact, Jessica, back in, I think it was 1878, Thomas Edison actually patented the megaphone. And what that is basically your hands around your mouth focusing on the sound, but you do it with a big tube. Cheerleaders will have these big megaphones.
Sure.
The opposite of a megaphone was if someone was hard of hearing, they would take a big cone, like a funnel, and put it to their ear. And again, this does the opposite. It takes a lot of sound and forces it into your ear. So people started using megaphones a long time ago. As a matter of fact, the Greeks used them back in the 6th century. And they would actually make a mask, and they'd make a megaphone in their mask. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, wait a minute. I thought Thomas Edison invented it. No, the Greeks did everything. The Greeks basically invented everything there is. Probably the computer, too. We just lost it at some point. The bottom line is, to be heard, they would use a megaphone or they put their hands around their mouth. Now, I mentioned Thomas Jefferson. Thomas Jefferson was really soft-spoken, so he was in trouble. Matter of fact, he even said he hated to give talks. He gave his first inaugural address in the Capitol building, and there was all these complaints because nobody could hear him. What he did is, he actually had his speech printed out and distributed to the crowd, and then he would give his speech. The politicians had a heck of a time screaming over crowds, and especially during debates, because a big thing was everyone yelling at one another, be quiet, be quiet, be quiet, we can't hear. And so it's very interesting. This is before the microphone, before the electronic amplifying devices. But basically there's two ways to magnify sound. One way is by funneling it. The other one is using a resonator. Now, the resonator is simply a box, but what it does is something entirely different. What the resonator does is it takes the sound and contains it and then explodes it.
How would that be used?
Well, a couple of ways. One, it's used to take sound and amplify it without using a big cone. To a degree, our mouth is simply a big cone. Our voice comes out from the back of our larynx, and we open our mouth, and that's like a cone. Animals will use this Helmholtz resonator. The elephant does it. Dinosaurs did it. What they do is they have this chamber. To describe it, I want you to imagine if you're sitting on the ground and you have a tennis ball and you want to play catch all by yourself, and you throw the tennis ball and you hit it against the wall and you catch it. But what if the room was really, really big and you were far away from the wall? You'd throw the tennis ball and it would just kind of roll to the wall and stop. See, that's what happens to sound in a really big room. Sometimes it just stops. What if you're in a really small room? Like a little closet. You throw the tennis ball and it hits you in the head because the room is so tight. And sometimes when you have a loud speaker in a very small room, like sometimes your car, if you turn the volume up too much, it just reverberates. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't sound right.
Oh.
You want to have exactly the right shape of the room for the sound. And if you can do that, then when you throw the tennis ball at exactly the right distance from the wall, it comes back and you catch it perfectly.
Oh, so that's how they use the resonator.
Exactly.
Right.
So, and that's why in nice amphitheaters, you have the exactly right size room for the orchestra. Matter of fact, some of our new stereos will actually detect how big your room is and then tell the speakers how loud to make the sound so that it reverberates just right.
Wow.
Animal in their nasal pharynx, in their nose, so they go "Rrrr," and they make the noise, and you can hear it miles away because they have that certain sound. That's how I invented my whistle. My whistle is really, really loud, twice as loud as any whistle, because I used a little box that reverberates it. Now, there's one whistle on the market called the Mega Mouth, and it's got a little megaphone on the back of it. Mine does the opposite. Mine takes the sound and crushes it, and like lightning, lets it burst out.
Huh.
So the presidents had a real problem. And what was really bad is if you were trying to give your speech and your opponents didn't like you, it was very easy for 5 or 6 guys to stifle your speech because there was no way to shout over them.
Oh, no.
Other than standing on a soapbox.
Wow.
There you go.
It's really interesting. Yeah, the power of, we just take it for granted today that you can just send a message over the internet. If we want to be heard, we can. It's not like 6 or 7 people just by yelling can drown us out totally.
But I thought of that when I heard about in Egypt, when they had these problems going on, the government tried to cancel the internet to try to stop everybody, but they couldn't do it. And so being heard from, I'm sure, 100,000 years ago to now is everything. Being understood and being heard is critical.
Wow. That's
There we go.
That's wonderful. Well, thanks so much, Dad, for chatting with me.
Great. It's been fun.
Well, that's our podcast for this week, everyone. Tune in next week. We'll be discussing some other delightful scientific phenomena and just breaking it down how it works. Thanks, Dad.